Welcome to Section 4, Lesson 1, Video 1. Here we're going to look at the surface area of right pyramids and right cones. Now before we get into surface area, let's review some formulas that you're going to need throughout this section and the following sections as well. So let's look at some two-dimensional formulas. So say a square. How do we find the area of the square? Area of a square is L squared because it's length times width, but because the length and the width are the same, we can write it as L squared. Now for a rectangle, we would have the area being length times width. For a triangle, the area is half the base times the height, or you can write it like this, base times height divided by 2. And then for a circle, area is equal to pi r squared. Now we don't need to work with perimeter much throughout this section, but perimeter is the distance around a figure. And for a circle, we actually call that the circumference. So circumference is equal to 2 pi r or pi d. Now let's look at some 3D formulas. So for example, a cube. How would you find the surface area of the cube? So surface area is found by finding the area of each side of a figure and then adding them all together. Now for a cube, since the area of one side is L squared and all 6 sides are the same, we come up with this formula here, 6L squared. Now the volume of any prism is always the area of the base times the height. And since the area of the base is L squared and the height is L, we write that as L cubed. So volume is how much space an object occupies. Now what about a rectangular prism? So the surface area can be found using this formula. So it's essentially the sum of the areas of the top and the bottom, which we write as 2LW, because the top and the bottom are the same, plus the sum of the areas of the left and the right side of the figure, so that would be 2 times W times H, and then the front and the back, which is 2 times L times H. So that's how you can find the total surface area of a rectangular prism. And the volume would just be, again, the area of the base times the height. So in this case, it would be length times width times height. Now for a cylinder, the surface area is 2 pi r h plus 2 pi r squared. Now the top and the bottom of the cylinder are circles, so that's where the 2 pi r squared comes from. The 2 pi r h is the curved part of the cylinder. Then for the volume, again it's area of the base times the height. Since the base is a circle, we would have pi r squared h. Now don't forget that when you're calculating surface area, the units are squared, and for volume, the units are cubed. Now Pythagorean theorem is something else you're going to have to use in some shapes, like a cone and a pyramid. So let's review. In this right triangle here, you have 2 legs, 2 sides, A and B, and then you have the hypotenuse, C. The hypotenuse is always across from the 90-degree angle. So the relationship that exists between the sides is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So let's do a couple of examples of finding a missing side length. So say in this triangle here, you have the 2 sides, 8 and 6, and you're looking for the hypotenuse x. So when we plug the values into the Pythagorean theorem, we would have 6 squared plus 8 squared equals x squared. So squaring 6 and 8 would give us 36 plus 64. Now I can add those together to give me 100. So now if 100 equals x squared, to find x you got to find the square root. And the square root of 100 is 10. So that means the hypotenuse is 10. Now if you look at this example, you notice it's slightly different because we're given the hypotenuse in this one. We're actually looking for a leg. So it doesn't really matter which one is A and B. Let's set A to be 15 and b to be x, and our c is 21. So we plug in the values, we get this. Now work it out. 15 squared is 225. 21 squared is 441. So now to solve for x, we want to get x by itself. So let's bring the 225 over to the right-hand side, giving us x squared equal 441 minus 225. When you subtract those, you should get 216. Now to find the square root of that, we would actually get a decimal. We can round that to be 14.7. So this is one approach to finding the leg of a right triangle. Another method is to set it up where you say x squared equals the hypotenuse squared minus the leg squared. So you can do that as well. So now that we've reviewed some formulas in the Pythagorean theorem, you can now move on to the next video in this lesson.